Hello, Kristiaan. Good to have you here as part of the exhibition and the discussion about the future of urban development in Europe. Just a few words about you. Without the work of the architect and urban designer Kristiaan Borret, it's not possible to understand the new and exemplary panorama of Belgian architecture and city development in recent years. Kristiaan, you have a large trajectory as Stadsbaumeister, first in Antwerp and then as chief architect of the Brussels capital region. This exhibition is centered on the responsibility that architects have not only for their architecture, but also for the spaces in between the buildings of the cities. How did you manage to interest a new generation of young architects, not only in their design qualities, but also in their responsibility for the public spaces of the city?
Yeah, my first thing would be to say, don't overestimate then the role of the incubator, because those architects, they were interested themselves also in taking responsibility for interaction with public space and so on, to have a more comprehensive view. But it's true that the role of the Bouwmeester is to give opportunities, to make an opening that these kind of things can happen. I think it's a kind of, also, you could say we try to change a city by means of individual projects. I think it's something in Brussels which is a very complex city. You have no other choices. You have to seize an opportunity when it's there. And then with always back in your mind, the idea, how can this single project have an impact that is larger than the project itself? How can it help to change a city as a whole? And for doing that, it's also kind of, it's a method I like. I like very much the idea that you should go up and down between scales, that you should try to link general vision and so on with doing something in reality on the grounds out there, showing that change is possible. And indeed, I think a multitude of projects can change the city as a whole. I think that's important as an idea. You don't always need big plans. A lot of small interventions, but really a lot of them can also bring a lot of change.
Yes, okay. Kristiaan, we continue with another question. Can you give us an example of how architecture and the surrounding urban space can stimulate each other to develop socially disadvantaged neighborhoods?
Yeah, I think I would take as an example what we call a Recipark. It's a place where you go to throw away your waste and then it's recycled and so on. You know, this kind of places. It's a competition that was won by 51N4E, Brussels office.
Yeah.
And the location is along the canal in Kuregem, which is part of Molenbeek, and on the border of Anderlecht, which is not an easy neighborhood. So for me, it's important. In the first sense, it's beautiful architecture. And I think even this kind of Recipark recycling installations, well, they are public equipment. They are more or less public space because you meet other people. So they deserve good architecture. They may be visible in the city. You shouldn't hide them somewhere in a business park. So you should put them on the first row and give them some good architecture. And the second thing is, during the competition, so the architects, they said, okay, we need this space for the functioning itself, but then we have some space left that is really along the street. So we want to do something with it, and we want to make a public space over there. And so they proposed to make a skate park over there. And so you get a kind of nice combination, firstly giving space to public use, then putting it on the first row, and then a kind of combination between two different worlds. So the youngsters are skating, and then the people that are waiting to go to the recycling installations. I think this kind of interconnecting both worlds in a difficult neighborhood Yeah, that's really interesting. And so that's why they won the competition.
Okay. Very early in your work, you emphasized the role of the Brussels Canal. What was the situation there at the beginning of your work, and what is today?
Yeah, so what I was telling about is Récy Park, that is along the canal. And the canal area is indeed the most important regeneration area in Brussels since something like 10 years. So 10 years ago, you had a lot of economy over there and small companies and so on, not in a very good state, often leaving the city. And so it was decided to regenerate the area. But then that's very important. So not just making apartments and offices and nice shops and bars and restaurants, the posh things, the waterfront development that we know from other cities. But it was decided that we should try to keep some productive activities over there. So some employment for blue-collar workers, because you need space for those people in the city as well. We will always need some productive jobs like the plumber, for instance, we will always need in the city, so we should provide some space. But we also can see that there is a new economy coming that is more urban, that is on food production, for instance, or that is very circular. So we should provide some space for these activities in the city. And so then this idea was accepted on the political level. It was also integrated in the spatial planning tools. And finally, that's our role. The Bouwmeester organized a lot of architecture competitions. And so now today you can see there are several projects. The Récy Park is one, but there are beer breweries, but there are also projects that combine housing on top of space for small and medium enterprises. And so I think this kind of new mix is very typical for the canal area now, and Brussels was really a pioneer in that regard. If you look around in Europe, it was really here that they started firstly.
Yes, I think, Kristiaan, that the Plan Canal is one of the big flags from your time as the Bouwmeester. But the other big flag we are seeing during last years, that's something that Belgium could be really proud of it. And this is the approach to the circularity in the building environment. Then last year, we know you launched this book. It's the Architecture of Reuse in Brussels. And you are really convinced that the things should go in this direction. The sub-theme of this exhibition is building with the already there. In other words, building with existing built stock wherever is possible. Brussels and Belgium have been a model in this careful use of grey energy. And we want to know what advice could you give to other cities, to other countries, local authorities, to make it happen this process of circularity since the beginning of the process.
Yeah, it's nice that your exhibition is about the already there. We call it in French, le déjà là. So what is already existing should be the basis of new development. What advice? So you should know, but you mentioned it, in fact, in Brussels, indeed, we owe a lot to Rotor, who was really a pioneer on putting on the agenda the fact that we should reuse materials. But saving materials from a building that is going to be demolished, and so especially the nice materials, yeah, it's only the tip of the iceberg. So I think today the challenge in Brussels is not just to reuse materials, but to reuse buildings, to reuse the construction, and so the concrete as in the building, because in the concrete construction of the building, there is a lot of carbon embedded and there is a lot of energy that has been consumed before. It's important, of course, to reduce the emissions in the future, because we need to reduce CO2 emissions, that's quite clear. So my advice would be perhaps, it's a bit provoking. So don't believe in BREEAM labels and so on for new premium buildings, because demolishing a building and replacing it by a new building, even if it's a premium building on the level of sustainability, it won't solve the problem. So these buildings, they promise to reduce emissions, not now, but in 30 years, because there will be less consumption of energy. But we need to reduce emissions now, because emissions that are reduced now will change the effects, and so will reduce also the effects on the climate. So I think the time is now to reuse buildings. What we've been doing it in Brussels is, in fact, adding a small sentence in the regulations saying that for every building permit, the rule is we keep the building, and if you still want to demolish, then you have to prove it. You have to make an argument. I think that is a good lesson, perhaps. Don't try to over-regulate by giving the answers, but regulate by putting the right questions.
Kristiaan, thanks a lot. And I know that there is the exhibition Soft Power, which started last year in Brussels and possibly will turn around at other places. So I advise to visit the exhibition, and thanks a lot for the interview.
Thanks a lot.